Hi everyone, Dr. Payne here with another episode of Functional Analysis, the only show on YouTube where we put pedals through 3 different conditions: solid state, a small low wattage tube, and a boutique tube condition. This week we are checking out a very cool pedal. This is the King Tone Fuzz. Now they don't make this particular model anymore. This is the Fuzz SI silicon, but they currently produce a Fuzz Mini that has all of these features, but is selectable between silicon and germanium. So while I'm not reviewing that pedal, this will be a review of the silicon side of that pedal. So check it out. All right, let's go over some of the features here. So we have got our input and output on the sides, which you know I'm not a huge fan of. And in addition, the power adapter plugs in through this side as well. So one early strike, but lots of other cool stuff going on. So the most obvious control is this huge knob in the middle, and that is a volume control. Works as a volume control should. About 50% is where you're going to be coming in at unity. Of course, you can push it beyond that and get quite a bit of good boost. In addition, we have 2 other small knobs at the bottom here. Here we have a bias knob, which controls the voltage going into the transistors. Now, the bias knob is a carryover. They make a silicon and a germanium fuzz version of this, or as I mentioned, in the newest edition, they have both in the same enclosure. Now, the bias here, if you know anything about fuzzes, really doesn't have that much effect on the silicon. So I'm just going to leave it right here for the duration. Moving it around wouldn't really change the sound. If you got the germanium version, however, it definitely would have more of an effect. And then finally, we have the fuzz knob over here, which goes from 0 to 100. You turn it to turn fuzz all the way up and fuzz all the way down. We'll be going through lots of those settings as we do the functional analysis. And then finally, there are 3 different types of fuzzes. We have a fat full fuzz, which is my personal favorite. Really, it gives a punched, really good boosted mid-range, but just really, really full sounding. We have the zonk fuzz, pretty famous type of fuzz, but really hits more of the high range. Quite a bit of bass cut. And then finally the vintage, which is a bit more mid-scooped. So those are the features. Let's go ahead and see how it sounds as we put it through our functional analysis. All right, so let's go through each of our conditions. Our first condition is going to be our solid state amp. We've got an old 1980s Fender Montreux back here, so pretty, a little obscure, but classic sort of Fender clean sounds through solid state, but, you know, 80s solid state. So let's go ahead and hear how our Fuzz SI pedal sounds. Here is the clean tone. Got them in drop D. All right, let's try that again. So let's hear how it sounds. Here is the clean tone. I'm playing my Fender Player Stratocaster with the Porter wide range humbucker pickups, and I'm in drop D. There's the clean tone. And then here is the fuzz. Has that sustain that you get from other silicon-based fuzzes. Now, I should note that there are a few different features here, as we went over before. So I'm going to keep the bias where it is. Honestly, the bias knob does very little with the silicon fuzz. It's obviously made more for the germanium fuzz, where the bias is going to matter a lot more. On the other side is the fuzz. We have it cranked all the way, so I'm going to bring that down to half for this next part. In addition, we have a three-way switch here. We've got the fat full, which is what we're on right now, zonk, and vintage. And so we'll go through each of those on each amp as well. So here is the fat full at 50%. Just kind of sings beautiful. Let's go ahead and move it to the zonk. More emphasis of the mid and highs and less of the lows. And then finally to the vintage. That's that vintage mid scoop sound. Let's bring the fuzz all the way down. We'll go through all three of those again. Again, here is the fat full. The zonk. Get a bit of a volume drop, so I'll turn the volume up. And then finally the vintage. So overall sounds pretty good through this pedal, through this amp, nice and clean. Let's go ahead and try another amp. Okay, our next condition is our small low wattage tube amp condition. We've got our Supro in for that. So let's hear how it sounds clean. So definitely already starting to get a little overdriven from where it's at. Let's kick in the fuzz. We're going to turn the fuzz all the way up, and we'll start with the fat full. Really hear that tube saturation. It's beautiful. Probably a little more on the high side. Again, we have the EQ set right at the middle, but set it a little lower might not be as pitchy. All right, let's try the zonk. Interesting, I actually don't don't hear as much of the taking out the low end on this particular amp. And then the vintage. Not as much of a difference between the three settings on this one, and I think it's because a lot of the distortion is coming both from the fuzz as well as just the tubes getting pushed. So you're going to get a different sound with this smaller tube amp because it's really getting pushed into that overdrive territory. This particular one runs a little darker, so that might be compensating for the loss of low end on some of these other settings. So we're going to turn the fuzz down halfway. Go through all three again. Here's the fat full. The zonk. And the vintage. Finally, with it turned down to 2, the fat full. Again, we'll turn the volume up a little. The zonk. And the vintage. Definitely think the vintage sounds the best at those lower fuzz levels. All right, well that's it for our small tube amp. So finally we will go to our boutique tube amp. All right, last but not least, we have our boutique tube amp condition. So here is the clean sound coming from our Port City Pearl. And same settings that we started with on the last one. Here is the fuzz on the fat full. Volume up a little bit. It's just really thick fuzz, just sounds really nice. And finally, the vintage. All right, here is it with the fuzz at half. Again, going back to the fat full. Very, not much of a noticeable difference on this one, actually. With the zonk. Definitely hearing the high come through a bit more. And with the vintage. And then finally with the fuzz at 2, fat full. The zonk. You can really hear the difference between that. finally the vintage. All right, so that was our functional analysis. Let's go check out the results. So now that we've completed our functional analysis, it's time to go over the results. So again, a very, very cool pedal. I honestly think to get the most sounds out of this pedal, the solid state actually gave me the most variability in sound. That is, when I switched between different modes, it sounded completely different regardless of the setting. With the tube amps, there were definitely settings which bled together, so the range of tones wasn't quite as much. With the small tube amp, this was definitely pushing it into overdrive to the extent where there was very little differentiation. Now, it sounded amazing, so not to take any points off there, but there are other less complicated fuzzes that can do the same thing, perhaps for less price. And then finally, with our boutique tube amp, I think this fuzz sounded amazing. Really, I think we got some of the best sounds out of it. However, again, with this pedal, it has a lot of features that I think the bigger tube amp didn't necessarily utilize. So if you've got a solid state amp, if you've got maybe a higher headroom tube amp, I think this is really, really good bet. However, I think if you have a more small or lower amperage tube amp, you might want to go with another fuzz pedal that is a little less expensive but can give you similar sounds. So that is it. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you like our content, make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out. We're trying to get these out every week. And some other really exciting videos coming up. And make sure to follow our Instagram to see what pedals we'll be reviewing in the future. So that's it for me. Take care and have a great day.